Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. My guest this evening is Lynn Caine. Lynn is publicity manager of Little Brown & Company in New York City. She has written a book called Widow. In 1970, her husband Martin was stricken with cancer and died in May of 1971. Widow is about her husband's death, picking up the pieces, and trying to make it alone. And that's what tonight's program is about. Lynn says that she's had experiences and feelings as a widow that she would like to share with us. Lynn, thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
You say over and over in the book that you think it's very important that we talk about death.
Yes, I do, because it's going to happen to all of us, and everyone acts as if death is something that happens to other people. How many times have you heard people say, if something should happen, God forbid, never when I die, or people just will not face it. Consequently, when this happened to me, I was totally unprepared to deal with it and put on a great big act for a very long period of time, because Martin was ill for 14 months. And I, without knowing it, mourned him for 14 months. Totally out of touch with my emotions. Doing everything right, all up here, nothing down here, nothing working, nothing connected.
You had a summer that you planned very well together.
Yes, we did. It was, in a way, the best summer of our lives.
Which is what you call the chapter in the book.
Yes, right. When I went to the hospital after Martin had his exploratory and was told that the prognosis was 0, he called me in. He told me that he wanted no funeral. He wanted to be cremated. He said, it is what it is. We don't know how much time there'll be, but let's use our time as well as we can. Let's do all the things we love the most. So as soon as he got out of the hospital, we drove up to Vermont, which we love, near the Casals Festival, near Brattleboro, and found a wonderful old house, white house, with green shutters and beautiful acreage. And we bought lots of things that we couldn't afford, invited a lot of people to come and visit us, and it was a beautiful, bittersweet summer because we knew that it was our last summer.
Would you change anything about that?
Well, knowing what I know now, I would have been much more upfront about my emotions. I would have recognized, had there been anybody to tell me that the act I was putting on would catch up with me and get me to a point where I was lurching toward madness, yes, I would do it very differently. I would talk to my children. I would try to open my children up. I would talk more to Martin. I once asked him if he was frightened, and he said no, and I believe him. He said, I don't want to die, but I'm not afraid to die. So we didn't talk as much as we should have. And as time went on, and it seemed forever, I began to get very mixed feelings about things. I got schizoid, really, that part of me wanted him to live forever. And as I watched him deteriorate and go into a different psychic dimension because we didn't talk, part of me wanted him to die. I wanted it over with. And I couldn't reconcile.
You probably never said that to anyone, though, did you?
I said it in my book. I said a lot of things later on. It wasn't until much later that I made any contact with my feelings.
You did something that I think most people would have a great deal of trouble doing, and that is you sat your 2 children down and you told them.
Well, it seemed at the time that we did a very good thing. Martin wanted to do it, and when we talked in the hospital that first time, he said, I want to tell the children. And the children were then, my son was 8, my daughter was 4, and Martin said, I have a very bad disease. It is called cancer. I will have to be in and out of the hospital a great deal of the time. We were very proud of the way we handled it. I asked the children if they had any, it was like a schoolroom. It was clinical. We never mentioned the word death. So that, in retrospect, I don't think we did a very good job.
And you would do it much differently now?
I'd scream, I'd rant, I'd rave, I'd bawl, I'd I'd express some emotion so that my children could. Just a couple of days ago, one of my daughter's gerbils died, and that child carried on in a way that was incredible. She was crying and terribly upset. And of course I realized that she was letting out a lot of her feelings about losing someone or something that she cared about. And it gave me a very good opportunity. I called my son in, and I said, you know, Buffy's carrying on doing things that we all should have done when Daddy died, that it is right and human to express grief when you lose someone or something. And we would have all been better off if we'd cried this way when Daddy died.
How did your friends react when they found out that Martin was going to die? Did they avoid you, or?
Well, my really close friends did not avoid me. But I was beginning, that was the beginning of pariahdom. There were people who crossed the street when they saw me coming. But I was so brave and wonderful and courageous, Jackie Kennedy / Queen Victoria, that I spared everybody. And Martin did too. We were very wonderful, and we were this gallant couple putting on a terrific act. What Martin did say to me at the outset that was terribly important, that I want to say, is when he told me that the prognosis was 0, he said, I'm going to die, darling, and it's going to be harder on you than it is on me, because it's going to be over for me. And he was right.
I'm not sure I would have been able to believe that at the time. Did you realize that he was telling you such a true thing?
He told me, yes. I didn't realize the impact. I mean, again, everything was up here and nothing was down here. I went through periods of self-pity, but it wasn't part of my act. Mm-hmm. That being gallant and stoic and wonderful, you don't feel sorry for yourself. The other thing that Martin told me that I loved a lot was, he said, you're going to be like Lolita's mother, and after I die, you're going to look at my picture, and you're going to shake your fist at me, and you're going to say, what did you have to go and die on me for?
Did you do that?
Yes, and it always makes me smile. Because even in the most horrible times of your life, there is some humor. And heaven help you if you don't have some sense of that. I've thought of it many, many times.
One of the things, you know, we all say a lot is that we avoid talking about death, and no one else wants to talk about it when you're involved, when someone you love dies. But the book is doing spectacularly well. How do you account for that?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons why. First of all, the book is not only about death, it's about loneliness. And I found in going around the country that we're a very alienated country. We are very disconnected. It is not a couple society, as many of us believe. It is not a TV special mom and pop hour anymore. There are a lot of divorced people, there are a lot of gay people, there are a lot of, you know, singles of all kinds, people locked into bad marriages, and nobody wants to admit it, and we just can't get together. So that I think that my book is appealing to feminists, to young people who are not afraid of death. Colleges are giving many, many more courses in thanatology. And the timing is right. And also, I like to talk about it. I like to be on shows like yours. I think the media has got to do it because everyone is freaked out about death. We have no preparation, no equipment. Very little first-person literature. There are, of course, textbooks, but who wants to read a textbook? Right. And I just think people, it is the last taboo, let's put it that way. Death, at some point, will come out of the closet. I don't believe it has as yet. And there are a lot of other books, too. There's Maria Manis's book. There's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book. Stuart Alsop's book. And unless we talk about it, it's, you know, we're just perpetuating a very abnormal, very sick attitude that knowledge of death makes life more precious and makes life more valid. And maybe if every great philosopher, I'm sure, has said, think about death once a day, and then life becomes terribly important, terribly vital. And you stop thinking about what you don't have, and you think that life, you know, it's a privilege.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about being a widow.
Mm-hmm.
You described being a widow as being in a foreign country where no one speaks your language.
Yes, I think that widows are very, very threatening to wives, to husbands. First of all, sexually threatening because you're an available woman. Men tend to protect widows. I think men are very different to divorcees. So there's the protection, there's the reminder of death and the sexual threat. Widow, to me, really became the dirtiest 5-letter word in the English language. That you really are an outcast, you lose status. There are just so many things operating, especially if you're a widow with no money. And you don't know how to perceive yourself. That's the other thing. So we begin with that. you don't know how to perceive yourself, you don't know how to act, people don't know how to perceive you, and there's a lot of, just sort of lack of communication.
You said one of the helpful things that you discovered was that grief has many sections.
It has, that's
you
right.
You went through many stages, rather. And,
right.
I found that very interesting and also very informative. And I'd like you to run down the stages, if you would.
Okay, and there aren't always necessarily in this order. I think the first reaction always is death, is shock. That you've heard people say, I'm sure, Sandy, the widow was so wonderful. Wasn't she marvelous? She was so dignified and so calm. She's in shock. She has not yet accepted the fact that the death has occurred. Then it's this numbness. It's an anesthesia, really.
This was the time in the book you described the great memorial cocktail party?
Oh, yes. I had a very classy memorial cocktail party. I did everything very clinically and was very self-conscious about the impression I was making. And I had a memorial service and brought people home afterwards. We had music. Friends played Mozart octet. Went back to my house, and everybody was sitting there and drinking and talking and laughing. And my friend from Washington, who had never met my friend from New York, was talking about where's your daughter going to college next year, and everybody was having a terrific time. The kids were running through the house playing tag. I did have a lot of children. I encouraged my friends to bring their children to the service, but it was totally unreal.
But weren't you offended by this behavior?
When I became aware of it, yes, I was saying, my God, what are they doing, sitting and laughing and eating and drinking? And then I suddenly felt very weak and very ill and faint, and I just said, excuse me, I'm going to bed. And I got into bed and I had pneumonia. Now, I had not been sick for 14 months. I'm not trying to blow the germ theory, but I am a cold sufferer. Yet during the 14 months that Martin was ill, I never had a cold. Yet after it was all over, I consented to lie down and had viral pneumonia. And was in terror. I was in absolute terror. I don't remember many things. Then I had to get up and I went back to work, and work was merciful.
How long did this last? Sort of numb stage?
The numbness, it lasted for quite a long time. I kept waiting to hurt, and when I hurt bad. And I had anxiety attacks. I had a lot of physical things and a lot of physical symptoms that I was unaware of again, that many doctors don't know about. Doctors, clergymen, people you would expect to help you often can't.
Who did you go to? I mean, did you go to clergymen?
No, I talked to this person and that person, but I was so into my act for such a long time that I did not want to admit to anyone that I was in very bad shape. And I did a lot of crazy things.
And craziness,
yeah, the next stage is craziness. Now, I'm not sure, again, that all women have this, but many, many women who have written to me and talked to me told me, you think you were crazy, let me tell you what I did. But the craziest thing that I did was to pick up, leave New York, where all my friends live, where my work is, where all my roots are, and move to a suburb, which was completely couples. P.S. I don't know how to drive. So I set about taking driving lessons. I began to have anxiety attacks, and the world divides itself between people who know what they are and people who don't. You know what they are? You've had to have one to know. And when people say, gee, I don't know, I think so, they've never had one. You wake up, and it was always 4 o'clock in the morning, in the fetal position, and you get an attack of terror. How am I going to face the world without my husband? I kept having fantasies that I had died and gone to hell, that it wasn't Martin who died, but here I was living in hell, in a suburb, no car, no one couple friend, and with people with whom I had nothing in common. I'd wake up, my hands would shake, my heart would start beating, and I was sure I was going to have a heart attack. Nobody would tell me what an anxiety attack was. The only person who helped me was a friend in Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics know very well what an anxiety attack is. And she said, you've just got to get out of bed. You've got to say to yourself, move your body, move your body. It will pass, it will pass. Keep a big jar of honey in the kitchen, because you are so enervated by these attacks that honey is a quick shot of energy to the bloodstream. Then I went one step further and I bought a stationary bicycle and got my blood jangling. Then 6:30 out taking driving lessons. And I took 18 lessons. I got a little worse every time. And I would clutch that wheel like that. And even if I had, ever succeeded in learning how to drive, which is unlikely in the state that I was in, I would never have been able to afford a car because I would have spent about $10,000 on driving lessons. That was a point at which I went to get professional help. I went to a woman analyst.
You also tore up towels.
Well, Martin had taught me that. He said, when I felt rotten just before Johnny was born, I was in intense pain. Rip up terry cloth towels. It's very good.
I went to my linen closet after I then took out some old towels.
Right, but these coping mechanisms are things that most doctors really do not know about, including analysts.
Yeah, someone should be able to tell you what might happen to you and tell you what to do about it in case it does.
Right, but if you're putting on an act and being brave, what I did learn was that I thought I was being so dignified, but the truth of the matter is that it is very undignified to deny your emotions and to repress your emotions. It is so arrogant, it is so grandiose to think that you are just better than human. And as a result of holding in, I to this day have been unable to cry.
You did another crazy thing that really intrigued me, the letter you wrote.
Yes, I felt at the time that the only thing that could save me, because my husband was uninsurable, I was left without any insurance. Martin had been very badly wounded in World War II, got a pension, a disability pension, 90%, which made him ineligible for commercial life insurance. So when he died, because cancer, as I was told, is an unknown etiology, I was ineligible for the pension because his death was not service-connected. So the money panic was enormous. How can I take care of 2 children? How can a little kid like me have all this responsibility?
You did have a job, though.
I had a job, but I was utterly helpless. I've thought many times since, it's taken me really 3 years to understand how women become so skillful at helplessness, because it has been the only weapon we've had for so many years. We become so skillful that we're very reluctant to give up our skills. And I just felt that the only way that I could be saved and my children could be saved was to get married again. That I never thought at that time that I would be able to do it. And I was talking about remarriage, which was insane. Martin told me to get married again. Even Martin, who knew me very well and loved me, said, I want you to get married again. And people were constantly saying this, that children should have a father, you've got to get married again, which is saying, lady, you can never make it alone. And I believe that. I know now that it's not true.
That must have been awful for, people to say to you, oh, well, you'll be all right, you'll remarry. I mean, how did you react to that?
I believed it. I really believed it somewhere way back that when the time came, I would get married again because I couldn't make it alone, which is hardly the case. But even after Martin's operation, a lawyer friend of his was in the hospital. Martin had to get an injection, and the man said, come on, walk down and have a cigarette, which he did. And he put his arm around me and he said, well, you still got your looks, you'll get married again. Don't worry, sweetie. And I was really outraged and said, Martin's still alive. Don't talk to me like that. But what is so terrible is that I believed it. Mm-hmm. You want to know the crazy thing I did?
Letter.
I wrote to a man I met once, a politician. I met him at a party in Washington. I knew he was very, very, very wealthy. And I wrote him a letter, and I said, among other things, you are fat and rich, I am poor and thin. My husband died of cancer, leaving me with 2 small children to support on a publishing salary. Would you please send me $500,000?
Oh, is that all you asked for?
I felt that was sort of, it wasn't piggy because I didn't ask for $1 million. And I knew he had millions and millions. And I thought that was a sort of nice amount and fair enough. And I actually waited. This is what's really crazy, and it's crazy enough to write it. But what was really crazy is that I looked at the mail every day, and I had a fantasy of a bright yellow check. Eventually, of course, I got a form letter or something. Sorry, madam, I cannot comply with your request.
What happened after craziness? What was the next stage?
After, finally, acceptance comes, I think. Hurt, pain, taking, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, recognizing that you're in trouble. And I did move back to the city where I belonged. And a lot of realizations, really having to understand who I was. I'm a backwards feminist. It took me a very, very long time to realize that I had to find a way to survive. And survival becomes terribly important. You recognize, I think, that there is very little between survival and collapse.
Do you think it would have helped if you'd known things like about life change units and things like that?
Oh, yes.
You
Yes.
might explain what that is.
Well, it's a study that Dr. Holmes did on stress and how much stress a human being can take. And you get points. I got a lot of points. I broke the bank. I forgot that there was something I forgot in there. I think you get 100 points for the death of a spouse. You get 50 points for moving, change of status, change of economics, lowering of your standard of living. And 200 is supposed to wipe you out. I got 299. But I don't know. I think often now that if I had any money, that I might have been able to afford a very lovely nervous breakdown. That I wanted that very much. I used to dream about going to Connecticut in the fall, going to a mental hospital, where I wasn't too bad, but they'd bring me a tray and somebody would take care of my kids. And I could just rest, but I couldn't afford to.
Lynn, how has grief changed you? I mean, you indicate in the book that you feel you're a very changed person.
Well, I think I appreciate life much more. And I also realized that I had to start all over again. I had to be reborn, and rebirth is very, very painful, but very, very rewarding. That I was no longer part of a couple society, that I had to make a new set of friends, although I still have many of my old friends. I've understood that there are many, many options that I never conceived of because, again, remarriage, a man taking care of me was the most important thing. Going back to the crazies a moment, if I may, one word of advice that I have for all widows, and I'm not an advice giver, my book is mostly what happened to me. But one of the things I did during this crazy period was to rush down to the Vermont Tourist Bureau, because this is during the time that Martin was in and out of the NIH, because he was a guinea pig in the cancer research program. And I thought, Vermont, that'd be terrific. I'll have a ski lodge. And I got all these beautiful glossy pamphlets and brought them home, and I wrote to a man who had small businesses in Vermont. Keep in mind, I don't know how to drive. I hate housework. I don't know who would have made the beds or served the food, or whether I was going to go around on my bicycle or what. I had not been on skis in 15 years. But I kept thinking, I've got to change. Everything's changed, so I've got to change very fast. And I really did not allow myself that time to understand, to yell, to scream, to say, help, I'm hurt. One person did help me, but she didn't live in New York, and that was Lyle Wertenbaker, whose husband had died of cancer in the 50s, and she wrote a book called Death of a Man. And Lyle was really about the only person I could talk to.
So I guess what you're saying is your impulse is to create a lot of motion around yourself,
Right.
but the best thing to do is to do nothing.
The best thing is to protect yourself from yourself, and the only way you can do that is to understand that you are crazy, because I was almost smug in my feeling that I was doing such sensible things, so good for the children, that won't it be wonderful? I will move out of town, I will move to a New Jersey suburb. My children will go to public school because, and I'll reduce my expenses, and I'm being so sensible. I'm changing my life, and I was out of my head.
One of the words in the book that keeps popping up is single parent, single provider,
Right.
a single person. How long did it take for you to think of yourself as a single person?
A very long time, a couple of years. A couple of years. I took my wedding ring off, because somebody told me to. It took me a very long time. When you're married 17 years, it's hard to make that change.
There's one chapter in the book called The First Love Affair,
Yes.
which I have to confess I thought was very funny.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. It was pretty terrible, too. But again, it's the lack of perspective, that you have no judgment, and it was very necessary. It was very unsatisfactory, very unrewarding, but at least I think it was the beginning of life instinct, and the life instinct is much stronger than the death instinct. And there does come a time, hopefully, that you want to get off the death trip. And there are many widows who just associate with each other, who become invisible, and that made me very angry. I did not like that label of widow, because I felt that I'm also a person, I'm a mother, I'm a working woman, I'm a laughing woman, I'm a lot of other things. And I avoided a lot of widows.
Were you more of a threat to other women as a widow than as a single person, do you think?
Oh yes, because men want to protect you. You are threatening in that way. What I do want to say, though, is I no longer feel the way I did about avoiding widows, because now I know that it's very dangerous not to go out into the world, and I would, feel that I've got an obligation and a responsibility, if another widow wants to talk to me, that I do want to exchange, experiences and urge them to get away from that and to stop being locked into the past. Because if you're locked into the past, you have no future.
There are some organizations, aren't there?
Yes, there are.
Did you join any?
No, I didn't. I didn't because I felt that I really wanted to be with men, and I wanted to be with laughing people, that I had mourned Martin for so long before he died, that I was just really, I had to get out of that. I didn't want to be locked into it. So I avoided it, but I'm going to be on their board this year on the Widows Consultation Bureau, because I think it's wrong that women
Lynn,
like me...
Thank you very much. We're out of time. Thank you for watching. See you next week.
Production funding provided by public television stations, the Ford Foundation, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.